Right after my husband's funeral, I attended my little nephew's first birthday party, and she declared, "My son was fathered by your husband. So for the inheritance, I'm taking half of your $800,000 house." She even presented his will to me. I said, "Oh, I see," and struggled not to burst out laughing. Because my husband, sometimes life throws you curveballs that are so wild, so unbelievable, you almost have to laugh. My husband, Ethan, had been gone for just 3 months, ripped from my life by a sudden aneurysm. But the real shock, the moment that stopped my world cold, came when my sister, Chloe, stood at her son's first birthday party and declared him to be Ethan's child, brandishing a forged will to claim half of my home. The twist? I almost burst out laughing right then and there, because she had no idea about the secret Ethan and I had kept, a secret that made her entire elaborate lie utterly impossible. My world had been a haze of grief, a suffocating blanket woven from sorrow and disbelief. The vibrant spring colors outside our Beacon Hill Victorian felt like a cruel joke, mocking the emptiness inside me. Ethan and we met 12 years ago at a charity auction. I was volunteering, helping organize the silent auction items, when he just outbid everyone for a painting I'd been admiring all night. It was the stunning watercolor of the Boston skyline at sunset, all vibrant oranges and purples bleeding into the harbor. He won it, walked straight over to me, and just handed it over. "I noticed you looking at this all night," he said, that smile making his blue eyes crinkle at the corners. "I think it belongs with you." That was Ethan. Thoughtful, observant, generous to a fault. I fell hard. Fast. Our first date was the next evening, and it felt like we'd known each other our entire lives. He was a corporate attorney, brilliant but so humble, the kind of man who remembered the names of waitstaff and asked genuine questions about their lives. 8 months later, he proposed on the harbor, the actual skyline mirroring the painting that brought us together. We bought our Victorian home in Beacon Hill shortly after our first anniversary. It was a stretch financially at $800,000, but Ethan had just made partner, and I was building a solid reputation as an interior designer. The house needed work, but it had good bones, high ceilings, a small garden out back where I envisioned future children playing. Those children never came. Not for lack of trying. For years, we charted and planned and hoped. Then came the doctors, the tests, the procedures. 4 rounds of IVF that drained our savings. Yes, but mostly, they drained our spirits. I still remember the last failed attempt, the quiet drive home from the clinic. Ethan reached across the console to hold my hand, neither of us speaking, because we both knew, deep down, that was the end of that road. "We can still have a beautiful life," Ethan said that night as we sat on our porch swing. "You and me, that is enough." And he meant it. Every single word. We slowly rebuilt our dreams. We traveled. We poured ourselves into our careers. We renovated the house room by room until it was the showcase home I had always imagined. Ethan supported my business when I decided to launch my own interior design firm. Our life was full, if different, than what we had first planned. My younger sister, Chloe, was always in the periphery of our happiness. 4 years younger than me, 30 at the time, she had always been the wild child of the family. While I was studying design and building a business, she was bouncing between jobs and relationships. Our parents constantly worried about her, which of course, translated to them making excuses for her behavior and bailing her out of financial troubles repeatedly. Chloe and I had a complicated relationship from childhood. She was undeniably beautiful, with that kind of effortless charm that drew people to her, but there was always an undercurrent of competition from her side. If I achieved something, she needed to one-up me. When I started dating Ethan, she suddenly became interested in law students. When we bought our house, she complained for months about her apartment, fishing for our parents to help her upgrade. It was exhausting, but Ethan encouraged me to maintain the relationship. "She's your only sister," he would remind me. "Family is important." 2 years ago, Chloe started dating Owen, a bartender she met while out with friends. He was handsome in a rugged way, with tattoos covering his arms and a motorcycle our parents definitely disapproved of. Their relationship seemed volatile from the outside, with dramatic breakups and passionate reconciliations. Then came the pregnancy announcement at Thanksgiving dinner the year before Ethan died. It was unexpected, to say the least. Here I was, living into societal expectations, yet struggling with infertility. And there she was, announcing her pregnancy with theatrical tears and declarations about the miracle of life. I felt that familiar sting of jealousy. After all our struggles, all our heartbreak, Chloe had accidentally achieved what we had desperately wanted. But I pushed those feelings down. I was genuinely happy for her, and I was determined to be the best aunt possible to her child. Leo was born a healthy 8 pounds 4 ounces. I was at the hospital with flowers and a handmade blanket I had spent months knitting. Chloe seemed overwhelmed by motherhood from the start, often calling me in tears about Leo's colic or her exhaustion. I stepped in as much as I could, sometimes watching Leo overnight so she could sleep. Ethan was less involved with Leo than I was. In retrospect, I thought it was because of our own infertility struggles that it might be painful for him to bond with a baby that wasn't ours. He was always kind when Chloe brought Leo over, but he maintained a certain distance that I never questioned at the time. Then came that terrible Tuesday morning. Ethan complained of a headache before leaving for work. I suggested he stay home, but he had an important client meeting. "Just a migraine," he insisted, kissing me goodbye. "I'll call you after the meeting." That call never came. Instead, I got one from the hospital. By the time I arrived, he was already gone. Brain aneurysm. They said nothing could have been done. He was 36 years old. The next days passed in a blur of arrangements and grief. Chloe was strangely absent during most of it, sending text messages claiming Leo was sick or she couldn't find a babysitter. When she did appear at the funeral, she stayed briefly, keeping to herself and leaving before the reception. I was too numb with grief to think much of it at the time. 1 week after we laid Ethan to rest, Leo's first birthday arrived. The last thing I wanted to do was attend a children's birthday party, but family obligations pulled at me. "Ethan would want you to go," my mother insisted during one of her daily check-in calls. He always said, "Family comes first." So, I found myself driving to Chloe's small rental house in a less desirable part of town. A wrapped gift on the passenger seat and dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. I had barely slept since Ethan died, spending nights staring at his empty side of the bed, reaching for a warmth that was no longer there. I parked behind a line of cars and took several deep breaths before grabbing the gift and heading inside. No one should have to fake happiness so soon after losing their husband, I thought, but I plastered on a smile and knocked on the door. Chloe's friend, Brooke, opened it, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of me. "Oh, Harper, you made it," she said, her voice oddly strained. She glanced over her shoulder before stepping aside. "Come in. Everyone is in the backyard." The small house was decorated with blue balloons and streamers. A banner reading, "Happy First Birthday, Leo," stretched across the living room wall. I noticed a group of people I didn't recognize clustered in the kitchen, whispering. They fell silent as I passed, their eyes following me. In the backyard, more guests stood in small groups, plastic cups in hand. I spotted my parents sitting awkwardly at a picnic table, looking uncomfortable. My father stood when he saw me, relief washing over his face. "Harper," he said, embracing me. "We weren't sure you'd come." "Of course I came," I replied, setting the gift on the designated table. "Where's the birthday boy?" "With Chloe," my mother said, not quite meeting my eyes. "They should be out soon for the cake." I mingled awkwardly, accepting condolences and deflecting questions about how I was holding up. Everyone seemed on edge, conversation stopping abruptly when I approached. I chalked it up to people not knowing how to act around a newly minted widow. After 30 uncomfortable minutes, Chloe emerged from the house carrying Leo on her hip. She was wearing a new dress I had never seen before, her hair freshly highlighted. Leo looked adorable in a little button-up shirt and bow tie, his chubby legs kicking with excitement at all the attention. Chloe barely acknowledged me as she placed Leo in his high chair. She seemed energized, almost giddy, moving around the yard with an unusual confidence. A guest tapped a spoon against her cup, calling for everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Leo's special day," she began, her voice carrying across the yard. "This past year has been full of surprises and challenges, as many of you know." The guests exchanged glances. My mother suddenly became very interested in her shoes. "I have been keeping a secret," Chloe continued, placing a hand on Leo's head. one that I can no longer hide, especially after recent events. A chill ran down my spine. Something was very wrong. Leo is not Owen's son, she announced, her eyes finding mine across the yard. He is Ethan's. The world seemed to stop. I heard gasps around me, felt my father stiffen beside me, but it was all background noise to the rushing in my ears. Harper's husband and I had a brief affair 2 years ago, Chloe continued, her voice steady and rehearsed. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness for both of us. We never meant to hurt anyone, but these things happen. I stood frozen, unable to process what I was hearing. My sister was claiming she had slept with my husband, that her son, the nephew I had lovingly cared for, was actually Ethan's child. It was so absurd that I almost laughed out loud. Chloe wasn't finished. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. Ethan knew the truth about Leo. Before he died, he updated his will. She held up the paper. He wanted his son to be provided for. This will states that half of the house Ethan and Harper own should go to Leo as his biological child. Every eye in the yard turned to me. I could see the pity, the morbid curiosity, the discomfort. My parents looked stricken, my father half standing as if unsure whether to intervene. And then, to everyone's surprise, including my own, I felt a smile tugging at my lips. Not a happy smile, but the kind that comes when something is so outrageously false that it becomes almost comical. I pressed my lips together, trying to contain the inappropriate laughter bubbling up inside me. Oh, I see, I said finally, my voice calm and even. I took a sip of water to buy time, to push down the urge to laugh in my sister's face. May I see this will, Chloe? Her confident expression faltered slightly. She clearly had not expected this reaction. Slowly, she walked over and handed me the document, a typed page with what appeared to be Ethan's signature at the bottom. I scanned it quickly, noting inconsistencies immediately. The formal language was all wrong. Nothing like the legal documents I had seen Ethan bring home. And the signature, while similar to Ethan's, was clearly forged. The connecting stroke between the A and D was wrong. The final flourish too pronounced. I carefully folded the paper and handed it back to her. Thank you for sharing this with me. I think I need to go now. That's it, Chloe asked, confusion evident in her voice. You're not going to say anything else? Not right now, I replied calmly, gathering my purse. This is Leo's day. We can discuss this privately later. I said goodbye to my shell-shocked parents, promising to call them soon. As I walked to my car, I could hear the murmurs behind me, the party atmosphere completely shattered. Once inside my car, safely out of view, I finally let out the laugh that had been threatening to escape. It started small, then grew until tears were streaming down my face. Not tears of joy, but a strange mix of grief, anger, and incredulous disbelief at my sister's audacity. Because there was something Chloe did not know. Something Ethan and I had never shared with anyone. Something that made her elaborate lie not just hurtful, but utterly impossible. The truth about Ethan and Chloe began 3 years ago, long before Leo was even conceived. We had invited my sister over for dinner to celebrate her new job at a marketing firm, her longest employment to date. Ethan had prepared his famous lasagna, and we had opened a good bottle of wine. It was a pleasant evening until I excused myself to take a work call from a client having a design emergency. The call took longer than expected, nearly 20 minutes of talking a wealthy client through hanging artwork. When I returned to the dining room, the atmosphere had changed. Ethan looked uncomfortable, and Chloe was sitting much closer to him than when I had left, her hand on his arm, laughing at something I hadn't heard. I thought nothing of it at the time. Chloe had always been affectionate, and the wine had been flowing freely. But later that night, as we were getting ready for bed, Ethan seemed troubled. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, sitting on the edge of our bed. "And I don't want it to cause problems between you and your sister, but I also don't want to keep secrets from you." He explained that while I was on the phone, Chloe had made a pass at him. Nothing dramatic, just inappropriate comments about how lucky I was to have him, followed by a suggestion that he deserved someone who could truly appreciate him. When he had rebuffed her, she laughed it off as a joke, saying I was too sensitive if he thought she was serious. I was hurt, but not entirely surprised. Chloe had always pushed boundaries. We decided to let it go as an isolated incident, something caused by wine and her usual competitive nature. But it was not isolated. Over the next few months, Chloe found ways to touch Ethan whenever I wasn't looking, sent text messages that walked the line between friendly and flirtatious, and once even showed up at his office uninvited, asking him to lunch. Each time, Ethan gently but firmly maintained boundaries and told me immediately afterwards. After the office incident, we confronted my parents about Chloe's behavior. It did not go well. They suggested Ethan was misinterpreting friendly gestures and that Chloe just looked up to him as a brother. My mother even suggested, with good intentions but terrible judgment, that perhaps Ethan was feeling flattered by the attention and exaggerating the situation. That night, Ethan and I made a decision. We would create distance from Chloe without causing a family rift. We declined invitations that included her, made sure we were never alone with her, and Ethan blocked her number on his phone after she sent a particularly suggestive late-night message. Then came the medical issue that changed everything. Ethan had been experiencing pain for weeks before finally seeing a urologist. The diagnosis was a varicocele, an enlargement of veins within the scrotum, requiring surgery. The procedure went well, but there was a complication. The doctor recommended a vasectomy during the same surgery due to the extensive nature of the varicocele and potential for recurrence. It was a difficult decision, especially given our past fertility struggles, but we agreed it was the right choice for Ethan's health. The vasectomy was performed 2 years before Leo was conceived. We kept this medical information private. Even our parents did not know. After years of invasive questions about our childless status, we had learned to protect our privacy around reproductive issues. The only people who knew were Ethan, myself, and Ethan's doctors. After the surgery, as Ethan was recovering, he made a prediction that seemed paranoid at the time. "Chloe is not done," he said, sitting in our garden with an ice pack discreetly positioned. "I have a feeling she might try something more drastic one day." I laughed it off, but Ethan was serious. The next week, he scheduled an appointment with our family attorney, David Miller. I went with him, listening as Ethan detailed Chloe's behavior in his recent medical procedure. David recommended documenting everything: the unwanted advances, the medical records confirming the vasectomy, even text messages and emails from Chloe. "You never know what might become relevant," David advised. "Better to have documentation and never need it than wish you had it later." We followed his advice, creating a file of everything related to the situation. Ethan also updated his will properly through official channels, making sure everything would come to me in the event of his death. David kept copies of all documents, and we placed the originals in a safety deposit box at our bank. "Just in case," Ethan had said when we locked the box, "though I plan to be around to deal with any of Chloe's drama for at least another 50 years. The morning after Leo's birthday party, I drove straight to the bank. The manager, who had known Ethan and me for years, expressed condolences as he led me to the vault. I sat alone in the small viewing room and opened the box Ethan and I had filled with what he jokingly called our disaster preparation kit. Inside was exactly what I needed: Ethan's legitimate will, notarized and properly executed, leaving everything to me. Medical records detailing his vasectomy 2 years before Leo's conception, making it biologically impossible for him to be the father. A journal Ethan had kept, documenting every inappropriate interaction with Chloe, including dates, times, and exact quotes. Printed copies of text messages she had sent him. A letter from our attorney confirming that he had witnessed Ethan's legitimate will and was available to verify its authenticity. And at the bottom of the box, a sealed envelope with my name written in Ethan's familiar handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened it and began to read. "My dearest Harper, if you are reading this, something has happened to me, and you have needed to access these documents. I hope it is many years from now when we are old and gray, and Chloe's antics are nothing but a distant memory we laugh about. But if not, if the worst has happened and she has tried to hurt you in my absence, please know that I tried to prepare for every possibility. Use these documents to protect yourself. I know how much you value family, how loyal you are to those you love, but you deserve to be protected from those who would take advantage of that beautiful heart of yours. I love you beyond words, beyond time. Whatever happens, know that, Ethan." Tears streamed down my face as I read his words, feeling his love and protection reaching out to me even after death. My practical, thoughtful husband had anticipated this. Not the specific scenario, perhaps, but the possibility that Chloe might try to use his death to her advantage. I carefully returned everything to the box except what I needed: copies of the medical records, the legitimate will, and selected journal entries. Then I called David Miller and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. David Miller's law office was in a converted brownstone in downtown Boston, the kind of place that exuded old money and discretion. I had only been there a handful of times with Ethan, but the receptionist recognized me immediately, her expression softening with sympathy. "Mrs. Preston," she said, standing to greet me. "Mr. Miller is expecting you. Please accept my condolences for your loss." David was in his 60s, with silver hair and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He had been Ethan's mentor when Ethan first joined the firm, and they had maintained a close friendship even after Ethan moved to a different practice. He stood when I entered, coming around his desk to embrace me briefly. "Harper," he said, gesturing for me to sit. I was devastated to hear about Ethan. "He was one of the good ones." "He was," I agreed, my voice catching slightly, and it seems he was also right about preparing for the worst with my sister. I explained what had happened at the birthday party, showing him the forged will Chloe had presented. David examined it, his expression growing increasingly concerned. "This is amateurish forgery," he said finally. "The language is all wrong, and the signature, while similar, would never stand up to expert analysis. But the fact that she created this at all is deeply troubling." I showed him the documents from the safety deposit box, the medical records confirming Ethan's vasectomy, the legitimate will, and Ethan's journal documenting Chloe's behavior over the years. "Ethan was nothing if not thorough," David said, reviewing the materials. "These medical records alone disprove her claim about Leo's paternity. The vasectomy was performed 2 years before the child was conceived. It's biologically impossible for Ethan to be the father." "What should I do?" I asked. "I don't want to humiliate her publicly, but I cannot let her take half of our home based on a lie." David leaned back in his chair. "Considering first, we need more information. I recommend hiring a private investigator to look into Chloe's current situation. There's likely a motivation beyond simple cruelty here. People rarely attempt fraud of this nature without financial pressure." He recommended Gary O'Connell, a former police detective who now worked as a private investigator, often on cases for the firm. I agreed, and David made the call immediately, explaining the situation in broad strokes. Gary arrived an hour later, a stocky man with a Boston accent and no-nonsense attitude. He took detailed notes as I explained the situation, asking pointed questions about Chloe's relationship history, employment, and financial status. I realized how little I actually knew about my sister's current circumstances. We had grown further apart since Leo's birth, with my attempts to be involved as an aunt often rebuffed or taken for granted. "I'll need a few days," Gary said when I had finished. "My preliminary focus will be on her financial situation and relationship with the child's actual father." "Is there anything else you can tell me about him?" I shared what little I knew about Owen, the bartender Chloe had been dating when she became pregnant. I had only met him a handful of times, and he had seemed uninterested in family gatherings. Last I heard, they were still together, but she rarely mentions him anymore. He wasn't at the party yesterday, which I thought was strange for the father of the birthday boy. Gary nodded, making another note. "That's a good starting point. I'll be in touch soon." 3 days later, Gary called requesting a meeting at David's office. When I arrived, both men were reviewing documents spread across the conference table. "Mrs. Preston," Gary began once we were seated, "I have uncovered some concerning information about your sister's situation." According to his investigation, Chloe was in dire financial straits. She had accumulated over $75,000 in debt spread across credit cards, personal loans, and medical bills for Leo, who had needed surgery for a heart defect shortly after birth. Her credit score was abysmal, and she had been rejected for 3 additional loans in the past month alone. "She is also facing eviction," Gary continued, sliding a document across the table. "This is a copy of the notice her landlord filed last week. She has until the end of the month to pay 4 months of back rent or vacate the property." As for Owen, he had apparently abandoned Chloe and Leo shortly after the birth, moving to Seattle with a new girlfriend. He was paying minimal child support, barely $200 a month, and even that irregularly. I also found these, Gary said, producing printouts of text messages. She has been telling friends about her plans to claim part of your house for weeks. These were messages between her and a friend named Brooke. I recognized the name as the woman who had opened the door at the party. The messages were damning. Ethan's death is terrible, but maybe it's finally my chance to get what I deserve. That house is worth at least $800K now. If I play this right, I'll have a nice nest egg for Leo and me. The will is almost ready. My friend Dave is good with Photoshop and found a sample of Ethan's signature online from some charity auction. It looks totally legit. Harper has always been the golden child. Time for me to get my share. She got 11 years with a great guy. The least she can do is share the wealth now that he's gone. I felt physically ill reading the calculated coldness of my sister's words. This was not just opportunism. It was premeditated fraud designed to capitalize on my grief. There's more, Gary said gently. I ran a background check on Owen Martin, the actual father. He has a history of domestic violence charges from a previous relationship and currently has a warrant out for unpaid child support for another child in New Hampshire. He's not someone you would want around your nephew. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything. My sister was not just desperate. She was willing to destroy Ethan's reputation and our marriage to solve her financial problems. And her choice in partners had put Leo in a potentially dangerous situation. What do I do with all this? I asked, looking between David and Gary. I cannot just expose all of this publicly. Leo is innocent in all of this. He's still my nephew. David removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. You have several options, Harper. We could file charges against Chloe for attempted fraud and forgery. That would likely result in criminal penalties for her, possibly even jail time, given the amount of money involved. Or, he continued, seeing my distress, we could handle this privately, confront her with the evidence, require her to retract her claims, and potentially work out an arrangement that protects both you and the child. I left the meeting with a heavy heart and a folder full of evidence. That evening, I called my therapist, Dr. Evelyn Reed, whom I had been seeing since Ethan's death, and scheduled an emergency session. In her calm, plant-filled office, I unloaded the entire situation. I'm so angry I can barely see straight, I admitted. But Leo is just a baby. None of this is his fault. And despite everything, Chloe is still my sister. Dr. Reed listened attentively, asking occasional questions about my relationship with Chloe throughout our lives. It sounds like this pattern of competition and manipulation has existed since childhood, she observed. The current situation is an escalation, not an anomaly. What would you do? I asked desperately. I cannot tell you what decision to make, she replied. But I will say that compassion does not mean allowing yourself to be victimized. You can be kind while still establishing firm boundaries and consequences. After much reflection, I decided on a course of action. I would confront Chloe privately with all the evidence, offering her a choice: face potential legal consequences for her fraud, or accept a compromise that would provide for Leo while requiring accountability from her. With renewed determination, I called Chloe the next morning. We need to talk about the will, I said when she answered. Can you come to my house tomorrow afternoon? Sure, you know Harper, she replied, sounding smugly satisfied. I knew you would come around. I'll be there at 2. I spent the morning preparing for Chloe's visit, arranging documents in a logical order and setting up recording devices on David's advice. Massachusetts is a 2-party consent state, he had warned me. So, you cannot record her secretly, but you can ask for her permission at the start of your conversation, framing it as a way to ensure you both have a record of any agreement reached. At precisely 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before opening the door. Chloe stood on the porch, looking polished in a new outfit, her confidence evident in her posture. Come in, I said, leading her to the living room where I had set up 2 chairs facing each other, a coffee table between them with a recorder, water glasses, and a folder of documents. I hope you don't mind if we record our conversation. It seems prudent, given the legal nature of what we're discussing. Chloe hesitated only briefly before nodding. Sure, Whatever makes you comfortable, though I think this can be pretty straightforward. The will is clear. I turned on the recorder, stating the date and time, and confirming Chloe's consent to be recorded. Then I sat back, studying my sister's face. Before we discuss the will, I'd like to understand exactly what you're claiming happened between you and Ethan. Chloe launched into a well-rehearsed story about a supposed affair 2 years ago. According to her version, she and Ethan had connected during a period when he and I were having problems. She claimed they met several times at a hotel downtown, that Ethan had confessed his unhappiness in our marriage, and that Leo was conceived during these encounters. He always meant to tell you, she said, her eyes wide with practiced sincerity. But then, Leo was born with a heart condition, and he didn't want to add stress to the situation. He promised he would provide for his son, though. I listened without interrupting, noting the inconsistencies in her timeline and the details that contradicted what I knew about Ethan's schedule during that period. When she finished, I began asking questions. "Which hotel did you meet at?" I asked. "The Mandarin Oriental," she replied quickly. "And what room do you remember?" She faltered slightly. "It was on a high floor. I don't recall the exact number." "What days of the week did you usually meet?" "Tuesdays, sometimes Thursdays, when he told you he was working late." I continued with increasingly specific questions. What did Ethan typically order from room service? What side of the bed did he prefer? Did he shower before or after? Details that only someone who had actually been intimate with Ethan would know. Chloe grew increasingly flustered, her answers becoming vague or contradictory. "Why does any of this matter?" she finally snapped. "The point is that Leo is Ethan's son, and the will proves Ethan wanted to provide for him." "Actually," I said calmly, opening my folder, "both of those claims are demonstrably false." I placed the medical records on the table between us. 2 years before Leo was conceived, Ethan had a vasectomy following surgery for a varicocele. It was completely successful, confirmed by follow-up tests. It was physically impossible for him to father a child after that procedure. Chloe's face drained of color. She picked up the medical records with trembling hands, scanning the clinical language and dates. "These could be faked," she said weakly. "They are not," I replied, "and Ethan's doctor is prepared to testify to their authenticity if necessary. But that is just the beginning." Next, I produced the legitimate will, notarized and properly filed with the court. This is Ethan's actual will, prepared by David Miller and witnessed by 2 partners at his firm. As you can see, it leaves everything to me, with no mention of Leo. Chloe's confidence was visibly crumbling, but she attempted to rally. "He must have changed it after this was drawn up. The will I have is more recent." "The will you have," I said evenly, "is a forgery. A poor one, I might add. David has already identified multiple legal inconsistencies in the language, and the signature is clearly fake. Creating a fraudulent will is a felony in Massachusetts, punishable by up to 5 years in prison." I continued methodically, presenting evidence. Ethan's journal documenting her inappropriate advances, the text messages between her and Brooke discussing the plan. And finally, the report from Gary's investigation detailing her financial troubles, eviction notice, and Owen's abandonment. "We know everything, Chloe," I said as she sat in stunned silence. "The question now is what happens next?" For a long moment, she did not speak. Then, to my surprise, she began to cry. Not the theatrical tears I had seen her use to manipulate our parents, but deep, body-racking sobs. "I didn't know what else to do," she finally said between gasps. "I'm going to be homeless. Leo and I will be out on the street in 2 weeks. Owen left us with nothing. The medical bills just keep coming. I thought if I could just get some money from the house." "So you decided to destroy Ethan's reputation?" I asked, my voice hardening. "To tell everyone he cheated on me, to forge legal documents. I was desperate," she shouted, her sadness turning to anger. "You have everything. This big house, a successful business, everyone's respect. What do I have? A baby with a heart condition, $75,000 in debt, and an eviction notice. You try making good decisions in that situation." Her outburst hung in the air between us. The raw honesty of it, stripped of the manipulation and lies, reached something in me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps understanding. Leo is Owen's son, isn't he? I asked more gently. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Yes. Ethan never touched me. Not like that. I did try with him years ago. He always shut me down immediately. He was annoyingly loyal to you. And the will. My friend Dave helped me create it. He does graphic design and thought it would be easy to fake a signature. I was going to use it to pressure you into giving me money. I never thought you would actually look into it so thoroughly. I turned off the recorder and sat back, considering my next move. Chloe watched me nervously, clearly expecting the worst. I could press charges, I said finally. What you did was illegal, not to mention cruel and calculated. She nodded miserably. I know. But that would hurt Leo, I continued. And despite everything, he is my nephew. I love him. I leaned forward, making sure she was looking directly at me. So, here is what's going to happen. You are going to tell everyone the truth. That you lied about the affair, that Leo is not Ethan's son, and that you forged the will. You will apologize publicly to me and to Ethan's memory. And then, she asked, her voice small, we'll still be evicted. I'm not finished, I said. In exchange for your full confession and a legal agreement never to attempt anything like this again, I will help you and Leo. Not by giving you half my house, but by setting up a trust fund for Leo's education and medical needs and helping you find stable housing. Her eyes widened. Why would you do that after what I did? Not for you, I said honestly. For Leo. And because Ethan would want me to help his nephew, even if that nephew's mother tried to destroy his reputation. There will be conditions, I continued. You will enter therapy and financial counseling. You will maintain steady employment, and you will allow me to be part of Leo's life to ensure he is being properly cared for. If you violate any of these conditions, the support stops immediately. Chloe was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. I don't deserve your help, she finally said. No, I agreed. You don't. But Leo deserves a stable home and medical care, and I deserve to have my husband's memory untarnished. This solution gives us both what we need. After further discussion of the details, Chloe agreed to my terms. We would meet with David the next day to formalize the agreement, and she would make her public confession at a family dinner the following weekend. As I showed her out, she paused at the door. I really am sorry, Harper, she said again. Not just for the will and the lies, but for everything. For the years of competition and jealousy, for not being the sister you deserved. I know, I replied, and I hope the therapy helps you understand why you made these choices. Leo deserves a mother who is emotionally healthy and honest. Do you think you will ever forgive me? I consider the question carefully. I don't know, I answered truthfully, but I'm willing to see where this new path takes us. For Leo's sake, and maybe someday for ours, too. The family dinner I arranged for Saturday evening was tense from the start. My parents arrived early, my mother bringing her signature lasagna as a peace offering. I don't know what this is about, she said as she set the dish on my counter, but Chloe has been calling us in tears, saying you're forcing her to come to some sort of family meeting. Just wait until everyone is here, I replied, pouring her a glass of wine. This needs to be addressed once, with everyone present. By 7 o'clock, we were all seated around my dining room table. My parents, Chloe, without Leo, who was with a babysitter, and me. David had advised me to record this conversation as well, and a small recorder sat in the center of the table. Thank you all for coming, I began after explaining the recording. I have asked Chloe to share some important information with you. Chloe, my sister, looked pale and uncomfortable, her usual confidence nowhere to be seen. She stared down at her plate as she spoke. I lied about Leo being Ethan's son, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan and I never had an affair. Leo is Owen's child, and I forged the will I showed at the birthday party. My parents stared at her in shock. But why would you do such a thing? My father demanded. Do you have any idea what that claim did to your sister? To Ethan's reputation. Chloe explained her desperate financial situation, her voice gaining strength as she detailed the mounting debts, Owen's abandonment, and the eviction notice. As she spoke, I could see my mother's expression shifting from shock to sympathy. Oh, honey, she said when Chloe finished. Why didn't you just come to us for help? You didn't need to make up such terrible lies. Would you have given me $400,000? Chloe asked bluntly. Because that's what I would have gotten if my plan had worked. Half the value of Harper's house. Of course, we couldn't give you that kind of money, my father said. But we could have helped with the rent, at least temporarily. Instead, you chose to try to defraud your own sister while she was grieving her husband. I know it was wrong, Chloe admitted. Harper has already made that abundantly clear. She has the evidence to press charges against me if she wanted to. My mother turned to me in alarm. You wouldn't do that to your own sister, would you, Harper? I felt a flash of frustration at her immediate defense of Chloe. Even now, I could, I said firmly. What she did was not just immoral, but illegal. Forgery and fraud are felonies. But she's family, my mother insisted. And she has Leo to think about. I'm family too, I replied, my voice rising slightly. Your daughter, too, the one who just lost her husband and then had to defend his memory against false accusations of infidelity. Where was your concern for me in all this? My father looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. Of course, we care about you, Harper, but Chloe has always needed more help, more guidance. And whose fault is that? I asked. You have been bailing her out of her poor decisions her entire life. Maybe if you had let her face consequences occasionally, she wouldn't have escalated to criminal behavior. My mother gasped. That's hardly fair, Harper. We have always treated you girls equally. Chloe surprisingly shook her head. No, Mom, you haven't. Harper is right. You always made excuses for me. Always found ways to fix my mistakes. It didn't help me. It just made me think I could do whatever I wanted without consequences. My parents looked stunned at this admission. For perhaps the first time, Chloe was taking responsibility rather than deflecting blame. So what happens now? My father asked, looking between us. Is Chloe going to jail? No, I said. I have decided not to press charges under certain conditions. I outlined the agreement Chloe and I had reached with David's help, the trust fund for Leo, the therapy and financial counseling requirements, and the stable employment condition. That's very generous, my father said, looking relieved. Especially after what she did. It is more than generous, Chloe agreed quietly. It is more than I deserve. While my mother said, brightening, this is all working out for the best. Chloe has apologized. Harper is helping with Leo, and we can put this ugly business behind us. It's not that simple, Mom, I said firmly. Trust has been broken here. The healing will take time, if it happens at all. And there need to be boundaries going forward. What kind of boundaries? She asked, looking worried. For one thing, I need you both to stop enabling Chloe's behavior. No more bailouts, no more excuses. She needs to stand on her own feet with appropriate support that does not perpetuate dependency. My father nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. And I need you to respect that my relationship with Chloe will be different now. I am involved in Leo's life because I love him and want the best for him. But Chloe and I will not be close the way we once were. At least not for a long time. My mother looked distressed. But we're family. We need to stick together, especially now. Being family does not mean tolerating abuse, Mom, I said gently. What Chloe did was abusive. She tried to use my grief to manipulate me, to take advantage of me at my most vulnerable. That has consequences, even within a family. The remainder of the dinner was subdued, with my parents processing this new reality. When they left, my father hugged me tightly, whispering, I'm proud of you, Harper. Ethan would be too. My mother hugged me as well, but her eyes were sad, already mourning the idealized family dynamic she had always pretended we had. Chloe was the last to leave. At the door, she hesitated. I really am sorry, she said again. Not just for the will and the lies, but for everything. For the years of competition and jealousy, for not being the sister you deserved. I know, I replied. And I hope the therapy helps you understand why you made these choices. Leo deserves a mother who is emotionally healthy and honest. Do you think you will ever forgive me? I considered the question carefully. I don't know, I answered truthfully. But I'm willing to see where this new path takes us. For Leo's sake, and maybe someday for ours, too. The drive home with my parents was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I knew one thing for certain. Our family would never be the same. But perhaps in time, it could be something healthier, built on honesty rather than illusion. 1 year after Ethan's death, I stood in our garden, watching the spring bulbs push through the soil. The daffodils Ethan had planted the previous fall were blooming, a riot of yellow against the newly green lawn. I felt a bittersweet ache seeing them, knowing he had put them in the ground with hopes of seeing them bloom. So much had changed in that year. The trust fund for Leo was established and already helping with his ongoing medical needs. His heart condition, while requiring monitoring, was responding well to treatment, and he was growing into a cheerful, curious toddler. Chloe had surprised everyone by truly embracing the conditions of our agreement. 6 months of therapy had helped her recognize patterns of behavior stemming from childhood. The constant need to compete with me, the self-sabotage that had characterized many of her decisions. She had found steady employment as an office manager at a dental practice, a job that provided stability and benefits. Our relationship remained formal but cordial. I saw Leo regularly, taking him for outings to the park or the children's museum. Chloe and I didn't pretend to be close, but we had found a way to coexist peacefully for Leo's sake. My parents had struggled initially with the new boundaries I had established. My mother especially found it difficult to accept that her daughters would not have the close relationship she had always envisioned. But over time, they too had adjusted, learning to support Chloe without enabling her dependency. As for me, the grief support group I had joined shortly after Ethan's death had become a lifeline. 12 strangers, bound together by loss, had become friends, understanding each other in ways that even well-meaning family and friends could not. We met weekly, sharing our journeys through grief, celebrating small victories, and supporting each other through the inevitable setbacks. 3 months after the confrontation with Chloe, I had established the Ethan Preston Foundation for Legal Education, providing scholarships to students from underprivileged backgrounds interested in corporate law. It gave me purpose to see Ethan's legacy continuing in the careers of young, idealistic lawyers who might otherwise never have had the opportunity to enter the profession. Old friends had stepped up in ways I could never have anticipated. Ethan's law partners checked in regularly, inviting me to dinners and events, making sure I wasn't isolated in my grief. My college roommate, Sarah, flew in from Chicago monthly just to spend weekends with me, sometimes doing nothing more than watching movies and ordering takeout. And then there was Michael. I met him at a fundraiser for the foundation 6 months after Ethan died. He was a professor of ethics at Boston University. Thoughtful and kind, with a quiet sense of humor that reminded me of Ethan in some ways. We started as friends, sharing coffee after foundation meetings, then gradually transitioned to occasional dinners. It was different than what I had with Ethan, as it should be. Michael understood that Ethan would always be part of my life, that loving again did not mean replacing what came before. We were taking things slowly, both of us cautious but hopeful. Standing in the garden that spring morning, I reflected on everything Ethan had taught me, not just during our years together, but even after he was gone. His foresight in preparing those documents had protected me when I was at my most vulnerable. His journal entries had validated my experiences with Chloe when my own parents tried to dismiss them. His love continued to shield me even in his absence. I had learned difficult lessons through this ordeal, that family relationships need clear boundaries to remain healthy, that documentation is not just a legal precaution but sometimes an emotional necessity, that forgiveness does not have to mean forgetting or allowing harmful patterns to continue. That sometimes the people we expect to protect us are the ones we need protection from. But I had also learned about my own strength. I had faced Chloe's betrayal, navigated the legal complexities, and made difficult decisions about how to move forward, all while processing the devastating loss of my husband. I had found a way to honor Ethan's memory while beginning to build a new life for myself. The daffodils swayed in the spring breeze, resilient after the long winter. I thought about how grief is like that, too. Not a straight line, but a series of seasons, each bringing its own challenges and unexpected beauties. I was not the same person I had been before Ethan died, before Chloe's betrayal. I was stronger in some ways, more cautious in others, but ultimately more authentic in how I approached relationships and boundaries. Sometimes the most painful betrayals force us to find strength we never knew we had. I said softly to the garden Ethan had loved, "You couldn't have known what would happen after you were gone. But somehow, you prepared me to face it, and in that way, your love protects me still." As I turned to go back inside, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. Not because the grief was gone, it never would be completely, but because I had found a way to carry it alongside hope for the future. Ethan had given me that gift, teaching me that love endures even when the person is gone, that preparation and honesty are acts of profound caring. If there's one thing I would share with anyone facing betrayal within their family, it is this: protect yourself with both documentation and boundaries. The people who truly love you will respect those boundaries, and the ones who don't were never safe for you to begin with. This journey taught me that love can endure beyond loss, and that true strength often emerges from the deepest betrayals. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family, even when it hurt? Share your stories below. I'm here to listen.